My name is Serafina Quinn, and the night my billionaire grandfather was thrown out into a raging storm will haunt me forever. Just hours earlier, he had handed my father $50 million with one simple request. Take care of me. But money has a way of unmasking people. I watched in disbelief as my dad's voice dripped with contempt. You're nothing but a burden now. Then the door slammed, leaving my grandfather frail, trembling outside like discarded trash. The rain lashed against his thin coat as he stood alone on the porch. My heart cracked. I ran into the storm, pulled him into my arms, and whispered, "You'll never be alone, Grandpa. I'll take care of you." I thought the worst was over that night, but I was wrong. Months later, when Grandpa's will was read aloud, the truth stunned everyone, especially me. I remember the exact moment it began. The living room glowed with the warm light of the chandelier, but the air was heavy with something I couldn't name. My grandfather, Harold Carter, sat in his old suit, his cane resting against the arm of the couch. His hands shook slightly as he pulled out a thick envelope sealed in wax. "Richard, Susan," he said, his voice low but steady, "I am entrusting you with something important. $50 million. Use it well. Use it to care for me." The words hung in the air like thunder. My mother gasped, pressing a hand to her chest in mock surprise. My father, Richard, blinked hard, as if trying to decide whether he'd heard correctly. Then his lips curled into a smile so wide it made my stomach turn. $50 million? He stammered, then forced out a laugh. "Dad, you shouldn't have. But of course, you'll be safe here with us." Susan quickly added, her voice dripping with honey. "Oh, Father, you've made the right choice. We'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry about a single thing." She leaned forward, touching Grandpa's arm with rehearsed affection. But I saw it, the glint in her eyes, sharp and hungry. I'd seen that look before, when she played poker with neighbors and pretended to lose only to take everyone's money in the last round. Grandpa nodded, almost as if he already knew what game they were playing, but he said nothing. Instead, he placed the envelope on the table between them. I could almost hear my father's heartbeat racing as he picked it up, clutching it like a holy relic. I stood in the corner, invisible as always, watching this performance. My father was never good at hiding his greed, and Susan's smile was too perfect to be genuine. The tension beneath their words was louder than any promise of care. "Don't worry, Serafina," Richard said, turning toward me with a booming laugh. "Your grandpa will have the best life possible under this roof. We're family, after all." His words made my skin crawl, because when my father said family, he meant ownership, and when he said care, he meant control. Grandpa glanced at me then, his eyes softer, almost apologetic. For a brief second, I wondered if he regretted what he had done, handing over not just his fortune but his dignity to a man who saw him as a ledger, not a father. I wanted to speak, to say don't trust them, but my throat closed up. So I said nothing. I only smiled faintly at him, hoping he'd see the truth in my eyes. That night, as the sound of glasses clinking and laughter filled the house, I sat awake in my room, staring at the ceiling. The gift that should have been a blessing felt like a curse, and deep down, I knew it would poison everything that followed. At first, everything looked perfect. My parents transformed the house into a stage for their new roles as devoted caretakers. My mother, Susan, woke early each morning, laying out crisp white napkins and pouring Grandpa a steaming cup of coffee. My father, Richard, would stroll in with exaggerated cheer, patting Grandpa's shoulder like he was the most cherished guest. "See, Dad?" Richard would beam. "This is your home now. You'll never want for anything again." But I could hear it in his tone, too polished, too forced, like lines from a play rehearsed one too many times. For a few weeks, my grandfather seemed to accept it. He even smiled sometimes, though it never reached his eyes. At dinner, while my parents laughed too loudly and served him generous portions of roast beef, I watched his gaze drift toward the window. He wasn't fooled, neither was I. The cracks began to show soon after. One evening, I passed the kitchen door, left slightly ajar, and froze when I heard their voices. Richard's voice was sharp. "He eats like a king. Do you realize how much those groceries cost? At this rate, He'll burn through the 50 million before I can even use it properly. Susan hissed back, her whisper harsh. Keep your voice down. He might hear. Just be patient. We'll tighten things slowly. He'll never notice. My stomach turned. Tighten things? On an 82-year-old man who had trusted them with his fortune? That night, when I brought Grandpa his tea, I noticed the faintest flicker in his eyes, as if he already knew. He sipped quietly and said nothing, but I sensed the weight pressing on him. As weeks rolled on, the devotion grew thinner. Mom began skipping the morning rituals, leaving a box of stale cereal on the counter instead. Dad stopped his cheerful greetings, replacing them with curt nods. The warmth drained from the house, replaced by whispers and sighs. One rainy afternoon, as I sat beside Grandpa in the living room, he turned to me suddenly. Serafina, he said softly, do you ever wonder if money ruins people? I blinked, unsure how to answer. Sometimes, I admitted, but I don't think it ruins everyone. He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the shadows dancing across the floor. I thought giving your father the money would bring us closer. Instead, it feels like I've put chains on myself. My chest tightened. I wanted to reach for his hand, to promise him I wouldn't let anything happen. But before I could speak, my mother entered, her voice bright as bells. Tea time, she chimed, her smile plastered on. Yet I caught the way her eyes slid past Grandpa like he was already fading into the furniture. That was the moment I knew. The mask was slipping, and behind it was nothing but hunger. The night it all shattered began with thunder. Rain pounded against the windows, streaking the glass in jagged lines. The lights flickered once, twice, as if the house itself knew what was coming. I sat, curled on the couch, laptop balanced on my knees, pretending to work but really just listening. The air was too thick, my parents' whispers too sharp. From the kitchen came the sound of a glass shattering against tile. Then my father's voice, booming with rage. I'm done, Richard roared. I've had enough of this old man draining us dry. I jumped to my feet. Through the doorway, I saw him standing red-faced, fists clenched, shards of glass glinting at his feet. My mother stood beside him, arms folded, her face cold and pale in the dim light. Richard, calm down, Susan murmured, though her tone carried no softness. We both knew this would happen. Maybe it's time. She paused, her lips curling ever so slightly. Maybe it's time we let him go. My chest tightened. Let him go? Grandpa Harold appeared then, shuffling into the kitchen with his cane, his frame looking frailer than ever against the storm rattling outside. He looked between them, eyes heavy with sorrow but not surprise. Is this how it is? He asked quietly. His voice was steady, but I heard the hurt underneath. I gave you everything. Richard sneered. And you're still not satisfied? You think 50 million buys you the right to rule this house? No, you're just a burden. The words sliced through the room. For a moment, even the storm seemed to hold its breath. I stepped forward. Dad, stop. Stay out of this, Serafina, he snapped, his glare cutting me down. You know nothing. You've done nothing. Don't you dare defend him. My hands shook, but I stood my ground. He's your father. Richard's laugh was bitter. Not anymore. Not after what he's cost me. Before I could react, he strode across the room, yanked open the front door, and the storm crashed in. Wind howled, rain lashed against the floor. Richard pointed to the darkness outside. Get out, he barked. You want care? Find it elsewhere. You're not my responsibility anymore. For a heartbeat, time froze. I saw Grandpa's shoulders sag, his cane trembling in his grip. Susan said nothing, just watched with folded arms, and that same unreadable expression. And then he stepped forward, into the storm. Grandpa! I cried, rushing after him. He stood on the porch, rain plastering his thin gray hair to his forehead, his coat soaked instantly through. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, like the storm itself might swallow him whole. My father's silhouette loomed in the doorway behind me, unmoved, unshaken. Shut the door, Serafina, he growled. This is done. I turned, fury and disbelief surging through me. No, you may have thrown him out, but I won't. I ran into the rain, wrapping my arms around Grandpa's frail body. He shivered, his voice breaking. I never thought it would end like this. Tears burned in my eyes as I whispered fiercely into the storm. You'll never be alone, Grandpa. Not while I'm here. Behind us, the door slammed shut with a final thud. And just like that, the chapter of my grandfather's life in that house ended not with love, but with exile. I pulled him close, shielding him from the rain, and guided him into the night. My heart pounded, but one thing was clear. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The storm that night never really ended. It followed us in silence, trailing behind every step we took toward my tiny apartment on the edge of town. The building was old, its paint peeling, the hallway lights buzzing faintly like dying fireflies. Hardly the kind of place for a billionaire, but it was all I had. I opened the door and guided Grandpa inside. The room smelled faintly of old wood and instant coffee, a single bed shoved against the wall, a wobbly table in the corner. My cheeks burned with shame. I'm sorry, I whispered, helping him into the chair. It's not much. But Harold only looked around with a tired smile. It's more than I have anywhere else. Those words cut deep. I heated water on a small kettle and made us instant noodles, placing the steaming bowls on the table. We ate in silence at first, the rain tapping gently against the cracked window. Then Grandpa chuckled softly, surprising me. Didn't think I'd end up in a student's apartment at 82, he said. I smiled weakly. Didn't think I'd be here either, but at least we're not alone. He nodded, slurping noodles with a dignity that made me laugh. For the first time in weeks, the tension in my chest eased. In the days that followed, we created a rhythm. Each morning, I brewed black coffee, his favorite. Each night, we shared cheap dinners and stories. He told me about the ranch he built in Idaho, about the years he fought droughts, debt, and doubt. His eyes lit up as he described sunsets over endless fields, and for a moment, he looked like the man he used to be. One evening, he leaned back in his chair and asked, "And what about you, Serafina? What dream keeps you going?" I hesitated, embarrassed, then admitted, I wanted to build software for hospitals, something that makes patient care faster, safer. I had plans, sketches, even code, but I never got far. He tapped his cane thoughtfully. Every empire starts small. Don't give up because it's hard. You've got fire in you, I can see it. His faith warmed me more than the ramen ever could. In that shabby room, we weren't a billionaire and a broke girl. We were just family, holding on to each other in the shadows. Yet, late at night, when he slept soundly on the bed and I curled on a thin mattress on the floor, the doubts returned. Could I really protect him? Could I make my dreams real when I barely kept the lights on? Still, each time I looked at him, peaceful under the weak glow of the lamp, I knew one thing. I would rather live in poverty with him than in luxury with those who had thrown him away. The first sign was the cough. At first it was just a dry tickle in Grandpa's throat, brushed off with a wave of his hand. Just a little cold, Serafina. Don't fuss. But as the weeks passed, the cough grew deeper, harsher, echoing through the small apartment like a warning bell I couldn't ignore. I worked 2 jobs by then, morning shifts at a cafe, late-night delivery runs racing back home in between to check on him. Sometimes I'd find him sitting by the window, his cane leaning against the wall, staring out at the flickering streetlight. His eyes would soften when he saw me, but his smile never hid the exhaustion. "Did you eat, Grandpa?" I'd ask, setting down greasy takeout. He'd nod, even when I knew he hadn't. One evening, as I prepared soup on the old stove, I overheard him whispering. His voice cracked, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. "I don't want to be a burden." My chest tightened. I set the ladle down and knelt beside him. "You're not a burden," I said fiercely. "You're my family, the only real family I have left." He touched my hand gently, his skin paper-thin and trembling. "You'll understand one day, Serafina. Money changes people. But love," he coughed, struggling for breath. "Love is rarer than gold." That night, the coughing didn't stop. His chest rattled with every breath, and I rushed him to the hospital. The fluorescent lights, the antiseptic smell, it all pressed in on me as doctors wheeled him away. I sat for hours in a plastic chair, my hands clasped so tight they ached. When Richard and Susan finally arrived, their entrance was a performance. My mother's heels clicked loudly on the tile floor as she carried a cheap bouquet of flowers. My father strode in with his phone glued to his ear, snapping orders to some business associate. They barely looked at Grandpa, lying pale beneath the sheets. Richard mumbled a half-hearted, "How are you, Dad?" before stepping back into the hall to finish his call. Susan placed the bouquet on the table, scrolled through her phone, and sighed. I wanted to scream at them. This man gave you everything, and this is all you can give back? But the words stuck in my throat, burning like acid. Later, when they left without a backward glance, I sat by Grandpa's bedside, spooning lukewarm broth into his mouth, wiping sweat from his forehead. His hand found mine in the dim light. "You're the only one who truly sees me," he whispered, his voice no stronger than the hum of the machines around us. Tears stung my eyes. "I should be doing more. You deserve better." He shook his head, managing a faint smile. "You've already given me more than I ever dreamed. Dignity, kindness, love." That night, as the machines beeped steadily and the rain began again outside, I realized how fragile everything was. The empire of 50 million my father clutched so tightly meant nothing here, under the harsh lights of a hospital room. What mattered was the fragile heartbeat of the man who had given me hope when I had none. And deep down, a terrible fear settled in my chest. I was running out of time. The day of the will reading, the sky was cold and gray, like it knew what was coming. I wore the only black dress I owned, one that still smelled faintly of coffee from my cafe shifts. My hands wouldn't stop trembling as I walked into the polished downtown office of Thompson and Reed, a place far too pristine for a family as broken as mine. The conference room was lined with dark oak shelves and leather chairs that seemed to swallow whoever sat in them. My father, Richard, was already there, pacing with impatience. My mother, Susan, sat with her legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like this was a tedious appointment she couldn't wait to leave. My cousins, David and Laura, lounged in the corner, whispering to each other. And then there was me alone, small, but burning inside with a mix of dread and defiance. The door opened, and Mr. Thompson, a tall man with gold-rimmed glasses, walked in carrying a thick folder. His voice was calm, steady, almost ceremonial. "Thank you all for coming," he said, adjusting his glasses. "We are here to honor the final wishes of Harold Carter." My chest tightened at the sound of Grandpa's name. Mr. Thompson opened the file, sliding out neatly typed documents. "As you are all aware, Harold Carter provided Richard Carter, his son, with a sum of $50 million during his lifetime, with the expectation that he would be cared for in his final years." I glanced at my father. He smirked, straightening his tie. "Yes, we took care of him," he said loudly. "Of course we did." I clenched my fists under the table. "Liar." Mr. Thompson's eyes flicked toward him, unreadable, before he continued. "However, what many of you may not know is that Harold Carter's assets extended far beyond that sum. At the time of his death, his estate was valued at approximately—" He paused, looking around the room. $200 million. The room went silent. I swear I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. "What?" Richard's voice cracked. $200 million? That's impossible." Susan's phone slipped from her hand onto the table with a sharp clatter. David's jaw dropped. Laura let out a soft gasp. Mr. Thompson kept his tone professional. "Yes. Investments, stocks, gold. Harold Carter accumulated wealth quietly, without disclosing it. And per his legally notarized will, he has left his entire remaining estate to—" I held my breath. "Serafina Quinn." The words echoed like thunder. My father shot to his feet, his chair screeching across the floor. "What?" His face was crimson, veins bulging in his neck. "This has to be a mistake. I'm his son. I was the one who—" "You were the one who abandoned him," I cut in, my voice shaking but steady. All eyes turned to me. My heart pounded, but I forced the words out. "You threw him out in the middle of a storm. I was there. I brought him in. Don't you dare claim you took care of him." Richard's eyes blazed with fury. "You ungrateful girl. You tricked him, didn't you? You poisoned him against me." Susan stood, her voice sharp as glass. "This is absurd. She's nothing." Just a freeloader with big dreams and no future. Harold would never leave her everything. Mr. Thompson calmly slid a USB drive across the table. Harold anticipated this reaction, which is why he left a video statement. He clicked the remote, and the flat screen on the wall came to life. There he was, Grandpa Harold. Frail, but with that same sharpness in his eyes. He sat in my little apartment, the lamp casting a warm glow on his lined face. "If you're watching this," he began, his voice steady, "then I am gone. And I know there will be anger. But hear me clearly. Richard, Susan, you were given your chance. $50 million. And you failed me. You failed to give me dignity, compassion, or love. You turned me into a burden." Susan gasped. Richard's fist slammed the table, but the video kept playing. "My granddaughter, Serafina, gave me none of those things, only kindness. She took me in when you cast me out. She gave me coffee in the mornings, listened to my stories, and made me feel human again. That is why I leave everything to her. Not just the money, but the responsibility. Serafina, use it to build something meaningful. That is my final wish." The screen went black. Silence filled the room. I sat frozen, tears streaming down my cheeks. Everyone else looked stunned, pale, like statues carved from disbelief. Finally, Richard broke the silence, his voice a guttural growl. "I'll sue. I'll take this to court." "There's no way," Mr. Thompson interrupted, his tone firm. "The will is airtight. The video is notarized. You have no case." Richard's face twisted, rage and humiliation battling in his eyes. He looked at me like he wanted to tear me apart. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wiped my tears, met his gaze, and whispered, "You may have had his money, Dad, but I had his love. And that's something you'll never own." The room fell into stunned silence again, and for the first time since the stormy night, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. When I walked out of that conference room, clutching the documents that named me heir to $200 million, my legs felt like they didn't belong to me. For days, I lived in a haze of disbelief. Me, Serafina Quinn, the broke girl from a cramped apartment, suddenly holding a fortune that could change lives. At first, I wanted to run, to hide. Money had already destroyed my parents, twisted my family into strangers. What if it poisoned me too? But every night, I remembered Grandpa's video. "Use it to build something meaningful." His voice echoed in my head like a compass pointing true north. So I started. The first thing I did was breathe life into the dream I'd buried, my healthcare software startup. I hired a small team, rented an office that didn't smell like mildew, and poured myself into coding. Each line of code felt like a promise to Grandpa that his legacy wouldn't rot in bank accounts but grow into something that saved lives. But I knew that wasn't enough. One morning, as I walked past a nursing home with peeling paint and broken windows, I stopped cold. The residents sat slumped in wheelchairs, staring blankly at a TV in the corner. The sight made my stomach twist. That could have been Grandpa. That was Grandpa, in a way discarded, unloved, unseen. That day, I made a decision. I would build a place where no elder would ever feel like trash again. I called it Harold's Haven. Construction began in the spring. I oversaw everything, from the gardens filled with wildflowers. Grandpa loved to the library, lined with books he once read to me. Each detail was a piece of him. The staff I hired weren't just nurses. They were people with compassion in their eyes. People who understood that dignity mattered as much as medicine. The grand opening was modest, no flashing cameras, no headlines. Just a small gathering of new residents, their families, and me. As I cut the ribbon, tears welled in my eyes. I could almost see Grandpa leaning on his cane, smiling quietly, proud but never boastful. That night, as I walked the halls of Harold's Haven, hearing laughter from the activity room and soft music from the garden, I whispered, "I did it, Grandpa. We did it." For the first time since the stormy night he was thrown into the rain, I felt something lift off my chest. The ashes of betrayal were still there, but from them, something new had grown a fire, not of greed, but of love. It's been over a year since the will reading, and sometimes I still wake up expecting to see peeling paint and hear the hum of that tiny apartment's broken radiator. But life has changed. Not because of the money, though it gave me tools I once only dreamed of, but because of what Grandpa taught me. On weekends, I walk through the garden at Harold's Haven, where roses bloom beside benches carved with quotes about love and dignity. Residents sit under the oak trees, some playing chess, others telling stories that echo with laughter. Each smile feels like a quiet victory. Every time I see an old man sip his coffee just the way Grandpa used to, my heart swells. My startup, too, has grown beyond my imagination. Hospitals now use our software to track patients more safely and efficiently. Doctors tell me lives have been saved. Each success reminds me of the night I sat with Grandpa over a bowl of ramen, confessing my fear of failure. He had looked at me and said, "Every empire starts small." He was right, but the most meaningful part isn't the business or the buildings, it's the people. One afternoon, a boy with messy brown hair tugged on my sleeve outside Harold's Haven. He couldn't have been more than 10. "Miss Quinn," he whispered shyly, "my grandma doesn't have anyone. Can she come here?" I knelt, smiling through tears. "Of course. Bring her. She'll have a home here." In that moment, I realized Grandpa's legacy wasn't the $200 million. It was this, a cycle of kindness, carried forward through me, through everyone touched by what we built together. Sometimes, when the sun sets and paints the sky in orange and gold, I find myself standing at the edge of the garden, looking up. The breeze rustles the leaves, and I almost hear his voice. "Don't let money blind you. Use it to create meaning." I close my eyes and whisper back, "I did it, Grandpa. We did it." For the first time in my life, I feel like I truly belong not to the broken family that cast us aside, but to a greater one built on compassion. And that is the legacy Harold Carter left me. Not wealth, not power, but the courage to choose love over greed, and the strength to turn betrayal into something beautiful.